Life before death, strength before weakness, journey before destination. If you're hearing this, you're going to be hearing those words quite a bit if you decide to read the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. Hello everyone, I'm Zach and you're watching Middle Fantasy, and if you're watching this video, you're thinking about reading the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. Usually when people start it, they don't really know what to do because the first thing they look at is just how darn big those books are. They're big enough to stop a bullet. I mean, I haven't seen if anyone's tried that yet, but I'm sure there's someone out there that has used these books for home defense. But today we're going to be talking about the Stormlight Archive and why you should read it, some tips to reading it, as well as what to expect when going into the series. Because for me, I went in completely blind, and it kind of took me a little bit to get really into the series, and I'm making this video to help people that really want to start the adventure, but at least have the proper tools to go on the expedition. So why don't we talk about it? I know for this video what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be breaking down the pros, the cons, some reading tips, as well as maybe a reading order that's both spoiler-free and a little spoilery without going into the narrative, just things that in my opinion will help with the enjoyment of the reading. So why don't we kick into it? So the Stormlight Archive is a sprawling war epic that is written by Brandon Sanderson. It's going to be 10 books and a handful of novellas, and it is a huge masterpiece of storytelling and literature. These books are huge for a reason, and we'll get into why that is. But the characters are vast, the themes are broad, but yet at sometimes very personal. And in the end of the day, again, you're gonna have a journey before you reach that destination. Because when it comes to the synopsis of the story, the best way to put it is you are on the planet of Roshar, a planet that always has like hurricane level winds, and it's just kind of a miserable place to be because nothing really grows there that doesn't have a shell and isn't composed of rock, but yet there's still human beings on this planet and they persevere. And on top of that, there's these magical creatures called Spren, which are kind of the manifestation of people's emotions, but also concepts such as when you're angry, you'll actually see physically, we'll see these things called anger spren, which will show emotion. If you're making a fire, sometimes you'll see little creatures that are called fire spren. You will see a lot of these types of creatures. They inhabit the world much as the humans. Now, if I wanted to give these basic synopsis, if you want to get the good hook, and that is just imagine this world, and now people start getting superpowers, but every person that has a superpower is fundamentally broken in one way, shape, or form. Maybe one person has depression, survivor's guilt, PTSD, they don't really know where they fit in the world, so on and so forth, and now they have superpowers and they are now the people that have to decide the fate of a whole world. That's kind of the Stormlight Archive in a nutshell, though I'm saying this very broadly in broad strokes. And what I love about the series, we'll go into the pros first because there's a lot of pros to the series, and that is, when it comes to the Stormlight Archive, if you are a character person, you will absolutely love the story. There are so many characters, there's hundreds of characters, a lot of characters that you will fall in love with, people you want to shake your fist at, and a lot of characters that just have so much heart to them that you really wish that you could just grab a beer with them. As well as when it comes to them, you get into their head, you understand their thoughts and feelings and what they want and what they desire, what they fear, what they hate, and really what angers them. And that's something that I think Brandon Sanderson does an amazing job when it comes to the Stormlight Archive. Is these characters are so believable that they could be walking across the street right now and you'll understand why they are the way they are, and that in the end of the day is one of the primary things that I love about the storytelling. If you love characters, you're gonna love this book. Now, another pro that I have to say about this book is the world building. I love the world building. Roshar is such a beautiful place. Yes, it might seem like a horrible place with hurricane level winds, but that's kind of the charm of it. You will see different races of people, you will see creatures, you will see cultures, you will see basically architecture that is so vast that your brain will just melt. And I think when it comes to this, the world building in this series is so great that you just kind of want to live in Roshar. Yeah, you can kind of like, maybe it's I shouldn't go out today, it's kind of a little stormy o'clock a little bit. But that's the beautiful thing about the world, is that it's so detailed, like much like A Song of Ice and Fire, the King Killer Chronicles, and all these vast series, even like Lord of the Rings, where you feel like you're there. It's pretty much, you want to be there, And it's okay that it's a little bad. I mean, I've been to LA and I've been to Detroit. Sometimes you compromise on the little things. But when it comes down to it, I love the world building. Now, another pro is if you know anything about Brandon Sanderson or you just love magic, the magic system in the Stormlight Archive is so vast and elaborate. It isn't elaborate like you need a PhD degree to actually enjoy it, but it's so detailed that you believe that the magic can be here. It actually, there's no reason why it wouldn't exist on this world, and everything about it is so much fun because of how elaborate and detailed this is. I think Brandon Sanderson really goes all out in this magic system, and you will know every minute thing. Every question you might think about who would win in a fight if this situation happens might actually peek its head out in the story one way, shape, or form. And that's the one thing that I love about this, is that Brandon Sanderson really doesn't leave anything out, especially when it comes to the magic system. It evolves all around light in many ways, and just the fundamentals of just creation itself. That's kind of the best way to put it, because all the magic in this is pretty much, yeah, what if you could like fly in the air, control gravity? What if you could turn one object into another thing? What if you could pretty much go between dimensions in a way? And that's the one thing I love about the Stormlight Archive, is a lot of the magic system, at first you think, oh, this is kind of silly. But by the end, you're just like, oh my god, I wish I had this power, I wish I had this power. And in the end of the day, you just keep reading and you kind of fall in love with the magic system. And if you could be an Order of Knights Radiant, you'd start to actually think about it much like the thing of like sorting houses, or what district are you in? Like, what Order of Knights Radiant are you in? It's obvious, I'm a Dustbringer. Yeah. And when it comes to the Stormlight Archive, this is a series that none of the words are wasted. Everything about it has a purpose and has a meaning. Yes, sometimes things are in broad strokes, but when you get later on into the series, sometimes things that you think is mundane might be more important, or vice versa. And I think for me, that's one of the beautiful things. It has such a good rereadability to it that I keep coming back and wanting to read 1,000+ pages for a book. Now we might as well talk about the cons, because this is the thing that, it's kind of like the threshold. Once you get past this a little bit, it's going to help you a lot. And that is, I think the biggest con is that the books are so darn long that you have to go in knowing that it's going to be a slow burn. But by the halfway point, or once you get up to a certain pages, you start to just forget that the book is so big and you just want to read it. I have a problem when I was reading the Stormlight Archive for the first time, was where I would take a very, very long time reading the book, but by the last 400, 300 pages, I would finish it in a sitting, because you want to know what happens and all the setups and the payoffs, because these books do have an amazing setup and payoff, but it does kind of have a slog a little bit, especially in the beginning. The Way of Kings, as much as it's a good book, it's a wind-up of a book. It takes a while to get into, and once you understand it, it gets so much better. And then once you get to the subsequent books, you understand more about the world in that way. You have the pitch and the wind-up, and I can't talk about Brandon Sanderson without talking about the Sanderlanche, and how each book, in my opinion, without spoiling anything, has some of the most defining moments in fantasy in the last 15, 20 years. And that's something that says a lot, because I read so much, is that you just have to bear in mind, you have to bear with it. Sometimes the slog is there, but it can help. But if you have a hard time with slogs, especially when it comes to books, this will be a little bit of a hard time. Now, I think the biggest hurdle, I think this is something I've heard from a lot of people, and that is, this book series does not baby you, in the sense of there really isn't a glossary. Like, you're not going to find just general terms about what is what. And that kind of becomes a problem, especially in The Way of Kings, when you have so many characters, you have so many concepts. Even though, Brandon Sanderson tries to spell it out as plainly as possible in the book, if you're not used to having a big world, pretty much, it's not Earth. Don't think of it as Earth in any way, shape, or form, really. So you're gonna have a hard time in the beginning, but that's the thing. If you can slowly ease yourself into it, you will find a lot of enjoyment out of it. Yes, there's a lot of amazing resources, but keep in mind, this is a con as well, I guess. You might get spoiled, and that's kind of something that you just have to be aware of, much like the Wheel of Time. Just be careful out there, because people are very passionate about this series, and some people know it front, back, sideways, upside down, and that's just something you have to keep aware of. But this series won't baby you, so you have to ease into it, and it's okay to go back and read passages and maybe even take notes, because that's kind of the problem. Is I wish there was more of a glossary. Yes, there is one, but it's more for the magic system than it is about who is this character, what is a shard blade, what is a shard plate. You understand those very quickly, but again, there's an easing into it. There's a threshold when it comes down to it. And lastly, I think the biggest hurdle on top of that is sort of just how, again, like how big the books are, and kind of, it's gonna sound real weird, but being comfortable while reading this book. And we'll talk about what I do for this, because if you look at these books, they're really thick, so trying to find the best way to read these books might be the biggest hurdle. I know that's like, wait, that's nothing to do with the detriment of the story, but it kind of does. When's the last time you've just felt uncomfortable while reading a book and you feel like your wrists are gonna snap, and it kind of just, you're worried about your wrist snapping more than the actual content of the book? If you can find a pillow when I read it as an ebook or an audiobook, you can. That's kind of the biggest hurdle, I think. When I show this book to people, people just turn green because they're afraid, oh God, this book is bigger than my child. It might weigh more than my small little child. Fun fact, I actually did that once with a friend. Their baby, I was like, can I hold your baby? Could you hold my book? And the person looked at me like, this book weighs as much as my child, I think. And I'm like, is this like a new metric that we use for measuring children now? How many Sanderson books does your baby weigh? Oh my God, your baby is a 4 Stormlight pounder over here. It's worth 4 Stormlight books. Wow. Huh. But those are kind of the pros and cons when it comes to the Stormlight Archive. Now, when it comes to the tips, what I recommend about this is that when it comes to Stormlight Archive, it's not a race. Take your time. This isn't a speed read. If you speed read, you're gonna have a miserable time with this. Just enjoy the journey. Journey before destination is the motto you should have with this. Take your time and you will go far. Maybe it's beneficial to have a character sheet a little bit, especially when it comes to the POV chapters, where you'll get introductions to people. It's good to maybe write them down, especially for the first book, because it's gonna help you in the long run, especially when it comes to the series of just who's who and what's going on here, because there's going to be a lot of characters on top of between parts of this book, because each book is broken up into 5 parts. There is a section between the parts where there's short stories. You'll follow completely random people, and there'll be really random POVs. So it helps to actually be aware of who you're following, because trust me, it will help you in the long run. Now, my last tip that I'm going to give when it comes to this is, again, there are some amazing resources out there, but keep in mind, it's going to be a rocky road, especially when you're looking for spoilers or not. Again, you can go to places like the Coppermind, but I found the biggest place that you can look for information, and this is going to be, I'm going to have a link down below, but the 17 Shard made this amazing interactive map that is going to help a lot with characters and a lot of events, but keep in mind, it does have spoilers. You can turn off things like the timeline, but just be aware if you accidentally click on something, you're not sure what's going on here or what's going on there, you will get spoiled, and that might be a problem. That's why it's hard to like really give a deep dive. Another place you can go to is if you're having a hard time, I recommend a beautiful reread podcast called The Duke and Duchess. They've completed all the way up into Oathbringer. One of them has read it, the other one has not, and they don't spoil anything, and they really go in depth on the whole concept of Roshar, as well as the whole narrative. So if you're having a hard time looking for things, that's a good resource to have, and I recommend that. Especially, there's plenty of reread podcasts, there's plenty of resources. I know I do my own guide for like the Orders of Knights Radiant, but just keep in mind, again, careful of spoilers. I know this is also a con too, but just be careful. Now, when it comes to the reading order, how do you even proceed with this? Because right now there's only a few books, but there's 2 ways to do this. One of them is spoilery, which we'll do last, but we'll do the one that is minor spoilery, and that is how do you read the Stormlight Archive, because there is a kind of a definitive way to read it right now, in my opinion, and that is, without going into spoilers, that is, you read The Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, the novella Edge Dancer, Oathbringer, then you read the novella Dawnshard, and then you read Rhythm of War. And this is kind of where you should start. It's important that you read Edge Dancer and Dawnshard where they are, because those take place between those 2 books. You're more than welcome to not read them if you don't know where to get them, even though you can get them on pretty much any major e-reader, or when it comes to Edge Dancer, currently you can get it in Arcanum Unbounded, or you can get it as its own individual book, whereas Dawnshard right now is an ebook only. There's going to be a physical copy later on, but currently right now for Dawnshard, it's an ebook currently, so just to keep that in mind. Now, we'll get into the spoiler reading order, because then I'm going to have to talk about the Cosmere. Now, this is a spoiler, there's going to be a timestamp down below, so keep in mind that. So for people that don't know what the Cosmere is the connected world of most of Brandon Sanderson's works. They are connected in the same universe. A lot of his books take place on different planets and different solar systems, but a lot of them connect either through characters, objects, events, and a lot of other minute details. I won't go into really yet because that's a whole conspiracy thing, and this is going to, be as least spoilery as possible. But when it comes to the Stormlight Archive, there's no exception. There are going to be connected elements of the Cosmere. Some of them are minor, some of them could potentially be altering the events of the series. Who knows, that type of stuff. I'm not going to tell, but it helps to read certain books within this reading order. And this is kind of a minor spoiler when it comes to it, because I recommend if you read these books, you're going to have more appreciation for the Stormlight Archive. And I guess it's more books to add to the pile, but trust me when I say that it will help with certain things and certain events will have more impact. So my reading order that I would recommend is The Way of Kings, Warbreaker, Words of Radiance, Edge Dancer, Oathbringer, Dawnshard, Rhythm of War, and then the first trilogy for Mistborn. Those are kind of, I would recommend. Yes, you can go more in depth into the Cosmere. There's other things that you can read, but I would recommend starting there for the full enjoyment. And once you finish those, you can go and read more of the Cosmere and then reread the series, and you'll find different things. It's pretty much like a treasure hunt or a scavenger hunt of picking out little things. But that's all I'm going to say about it. My lips are sealed. But that's kind of my thoughts and feelings when it comes to the reading order. Do you need to read all the Cosmere to like these books? No, that's the important thing. You don't have to. They help with the enjoyment factor, but they aren't the primary thing that you have to read to enjoy them. You can read these as a standalone, and that's all I'll say about it. And I think that's going to conclude this video, kind of talking about what to expect from the Stormlight Archive and kind of why you should read it. Now, I am so excited for you all to start your adventure. It's going to be adventurous, it's going to be eventful. Some of you will laugh, some of you will cry, some of you will just curse people's names and fist up into the sky. And that's kind of the fun thing about the Stormlight Archive, is there's so many different reactions. I am so excited for every single one of you. I'm so proud. Yes, this is going to be an adventure. I can't wait for you all to read. If you actually take this video and actually read the Stormlight Archive, comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and feelings. If you've read the Stormlight Archive but you're looking for more, I'd love to hear your thoughts and feelings. Just leave that in the comments down below, and we'll just have a huge journey together, everyone. Well, thank you all so much. If you liked this video and you found it informative, please subscribe, leave a like. I'd really appreciate that. Ring that bell. I guess ring the bell if you know that a high storm's coming, because then you'll get notifications for when other videos of mine come out. Well, everyone, thank you all so much. And like always, everyone, may your food and drink ever be tasteful. May your books be filled with fantasy and adventure. Bye, everyone. See ya!